Hi there, I'm Michelle the painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. All right, so today we're gonna be painting autumn birch trees, and I'm gonna be sipping a little Pinot Grigio. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. All right, so the materials that we're gonna be using today is a 16 by 20 stretched and primed canvas. You can get this at any of your local craft stores or online, and you can switch up the size if you want. We're gonna be using acrylic paint today. The colors I'm using are titanium white, chrome yellow, burnt sienna, phthalo green. This is raw umber, Mars black, fire red, and chrome orange. The brushes I'm going to be using today is a 1-inch wide bristle brush. I'm using a number 0 round brush. I will also be using a number 2 pencil. And you're going to need a cup of water for washing your brushes, and you'll need some paper towels for drying your brushes. And of course the colors you can switch up as you see fit as well, but that's all of the materials that we're gonna need for today's painting. All right, so for the first step, what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be doing an outline of the trees. I have 3 trees. They're kind of off-center. They're birch trees, so I'm not gonna worry about the branches or anything. I'm just using my pencil. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of mark where I want them to start up at the top. And then that way, I've got myself a good gauge as to like the layout of them. You could do the same at the bottom if you wanted to. But then I'm just gonna start to draw an outline to the trees. They don't have to be perfect. You don't want them to look like telephone poles. So I definitely will give them like a different width going through. This one I'm gonna kind of bend over into this direction. I'm gonna have these 2 right ones actually converge down at the bottom. But you could certainly have fun with this and make it, you know, more interesting than I'm doing, or you could do it exactly as I'm doing. Whatever works for you is fine by me. But I'm definitely separating these out, so that way when I am doing my background colors, I'll have them separated and it'll be a lot easier. So right now I have 1, 2, 3 trees, and you can put your pencil down and you're gonna get your bristle brush out and ready for the next step. All right, so for the next step, I'm going to be filling in the background. This is gonna be an out of focus forest behind my trees. I'm gonna be using my bristle brush. The colors that I'm gonna be using are yellow, burnt sienna, my green phthalo, and my raw umber. And I'm gonna be using very little bit of paint. I'm gonna start with my yellow. But what I'm in essence doing is just kind of rubbing it into the canvas. The reason why I'm using very little bit of paint is because I wanna be able to control where it's going, and I wanna maintain the distinction between the colors. So by doing it this way, when I go into the next color, which for me is gonna be maybe the rust, or the burnt sienna, I'll be able to kind of introduce it into that yellow without blending it all the way, because the yellow is probably already nice and dry. If you use a thin coat, you can probably hear the scratching on my canvas right now also. That indicates that I am not using a lot of paint. And you can see I am hitting my outline of my trees a little bit. That's totally okay. I don't suggest that you go too much into those trees, because sometimes these colors are a little bit more difficult to paint over. So as you get into painting the tree, if you have a lot of these bright colors underneath the white and the gray that you're going to be using, it might make it a little bit more difficult to paint over them. And you can see I'm kind of doing almost sections of these colors. I am overlapping them in some areas. I'm going back into my yellow. I think I want this to be a little bit more yellow all the way up here. I'm not washing my brush throughout this step. That way the colors will naturally blend into each other. I just touched my brush into the brown color or the raw umber, and now I'm going, getting the canvas to be a little bit darker as it comes down my canvas, which is kind of my intent. I want it to be nice and deep and dark as it gets down towards the base of the forest. I just touched my brush into the phthalo green, which is a very vibrant color, so I immediately counteracted it with a little bit of the brown. That phthalo it really is super vibrant, so as you're using it, just kind of be mindful. If you want it to be, you know, really, really colorful and have almost a fantasy type feel to it, go for it. Use it really bright and bold, but if you want it to be a little bit more natural, that's when you're going to want to add the brown into it. I did choose to use the phthalo green on this painting because when you look into a deep, dark forest, it does have those bluey green kind of tones. So you can certainly, you could use, I suppose, like a forest green or a different shade of green, but I like this in the painting. It adds a nice pop of color. I'm using a little bit of the green and the yellow to get some of that green to happen up and through here. And you can see again, I'm just kind of doing sections so that way they can overlap and it almost just looks like it's out of focus, that perhaps whoever took the original photo of this, or whoever, you know, is looking at it in their own optical lens, the trees become the focal point and everything else behind it becomes more of just background noise. So right now I just added a little bit of black and brown to my brush. Oops, we don't want to knock over my wine. That would not be a good thing to do while you're painting and sipping. But I want this forest again to be nice and deep and dark down at the bottom. So right now I'm using my rust color, my brown, my black. Again, I'm not washing my brush, so the colors will merge into each other really nice and naturally. And I'm almost done here, just getting these last couple of sections. It takes me a little while, and the reason why is because I'm not using a ton of paint. Again, if you use a ton of paint on your brush, you're really apt to almost over blend it, and what'll happen is all your colors will look like they are one color, because your brush really wants to keep blending and blending when the paint is wet. So because I'm not using a lot of paint, that allows me to get this nice even gradient, and it will allow me to get these colors to blend really nicely together and make them look like they belong together. And again, I went light at the top and I'm going darker as I come down towards the bottom. Up at the top, I did it kind of in little color sections. You can also paint the edges or the sides of your canvas if you want as you go along. I like to do that to give it a nice finished effect. But I'm digging the way that this is looking right now, so I'm just going to kind of do a couple more little touch-ups in through here, and then I'm going to be switching brushes to, nope, I'm going to be using the same brush, but I'm going to wash it and dry it before I go on to the next step. So once you get this all nice and complete, you can wash and dry this bristle brush and get ready for the next step. All right, for the next step, I'm going to be using my bristle brush. The three colors I'm going to be using are white, whoops, there goes a little brush, white, black, and brown. And I'm going to be doing the first layer of my trees. So for me, I'm going to be doing them in different shades of grayish brown. I'm going to be doing my left one the darkest, and then these two lighter, so they look like they're forward, and this one looks like it's back a little bit. So I will not be pre-mixing a color on my brush. I'm just going to put all three colors on my brush at the same time. And I'm just going to be going up and down and making sure I have kind of a nice clean edge over on the side of this tree. I am going to attempt to get the right side of these trees a little bit darker than the left side, and that's going to provide me with a nice shadow look or good dimension to the trees. So I started out pretty dark on that right hand side, and then as I'm going towards the left hand side, I'm going to be picking up more white and brown, and that's going to lighten it up as I come over towards that left hand side. And it's okay if you make this tree pretty darn dark. The darker you make it look, the deeper in the forest it's going to appear to be, even if it is a nice light birch tree. You can certainly have some darkness to it. I have a little bristle here that's getting in my way. But you could make it really bright and light and make it look like the sun is really shining inside your forest, or you could have it a little bit darker and a little bit more dreary. That's totally up to you. I like this left tree to be pretty dark. I'm gonna go next. I did not wash my brush. I'm gonna go right into these two trees, but I only picked up white and brown. And this way it will definitely, because I didn't pick up the black, it will help me to control the darkness of this. If I want it to be a little bit more dark, I could certainly add a little bit of the black onto it, which I very well may do in my shadowy areas, but right now I'm just kind of getting a nice clean outline over on these right hand sides. I am using a good amount of paint, that way it will take the paint a minute or two to dry, which allows me to continue to work the paint as it is in the process of drying. So I did my little bit darker area on the right hand side. Now I'm just going to be picking up white without washing my brush, and that's going to allow me to get the left side of these trees nice and light. And if you have a lot of your background colors showing through, if you had come far into the tree, you might end up wanting to do a couple of coats along the border of that tree. But you know, once you put the birch marks on, sometimes that helps to disguise any color that might be showing through, or you just quickly put a second coat on. Whatever works for you is fine by me. So that one's pretty good. Now I'm going to go on to this one over here, just adding a little bit of white to my brush. I want to get kind of a clean edge over on the side of the tree, so I go a little bit slower as I'm riding the side of the tree down with my brush, and I almost just kind of like push it towards that outline. That helps me to get a nice clean edge as I'm going. And you know, these bristle brushes are great because you can utilize them for many different techniques, but this one, if I want it to be nice and soft, I end up not pushing hard on the brush, and that allows me to eliminate any distinct what I refer to as scratch marks from this type of brush. And no, you're going to have all of those birch marks that will again hide a whole lot of stuff on these trees, but I'm digging this. I've got the dark side on the right of each of them. I've got this one to look like it's set back a little bit. Maybe I'll add just a touch more brown on this one. So this one's darker, it looks like it's further back. And we are going to be using the small brush for the next step. So after you get done with this, you will put your big brush away in your water cup and take out your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so for the next step, we're gonna be doing the birch marks. I'm gonna be using my small brush. I'm gonna be using black paint to start, and then we'll finish it with some white paint. These birch marks are a lot simpler than you may think that they are, because they're really just marks. So I'm going to be using black paint, and I just want to have some varying shapes and sizes. So what I do is I, in essence, kind of wiggle my brush and get some of them to go along the side of it. Some of them are going to go, you know, almost like polka dots. So you don't have to make them look all the same. If you get kind of hung up on making them look exactly the same, it may end up looking like zebra-esque, which is okay. but the more distinct or variety of shapes you can have, the better off or the more natural it will look. So if you have to do, like let go of your brush and don't hold it so tight, sometimes that helps to make a different kind of look. Skip around the tree a little bit, make ones that look more like circles, or make them kind of, have a bend to them. That helps out. You can make some really huge ones. So just know that the variety of shapes within your birch marks is going to help this look a lot more natural. If they all look the same, it'll look more, it'll look painterly or like more cartoony kind of if they all look the same. But so I just I try and go as quickly as I can, and that way it doesn't give me time to think. I can just, move right along. I've got circles, I've got dashes, I've got wiggles, I've got them going in different directions, and that way it gives me a nice full coverage, but again, I don't get hung up on the exact detail of every single piece of birch mark that I'm making. So and plus we're gonna have tons of leaves that are gonna be intermingled with these in a little bit. So know that you've got that coming as well. So I'm just gonna kind of quickly go through here and make a few more coming down this tree. And sometimes if you introduce a distinct bend to them, it also gives that viewer the information that this is definitely a round tree. So, again, those type of bits of details that you can introduce without really making it an obvious thing that you've done, that totally helps to, again, make it look more natural. And once you have all the black marks on here, I do one final thing to the birch marks to make them look even more natural, and I use the small brush. I just quickly washed it and dried it, and I put a little bit of a white outline to the top of them. This makes it look like there's a little broken piece of the, this dark part of a birch tree gets exposed by the regular bark almost peeling off the tree. So these little white highlights on the top edge help to, again, add to the illusion that these are really the actual pieces of bark peeling off of the birch tree. And they'll be more visible on the darker tree, obviously, because the white against the dark gray will be more visible. And that's all I'm going to do for the birch marks. So we're going to be using the bristle brush for the next step. So when you're all set with that, you can get out your bristle brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so for the next step, what we're doing is we're going to be using the bristle brush. We're going to be putting the leaves on the canvas. I will be using white, yellow, orange, and red. You could certainly use the rust color if you want to. I might actually use it at the end, but where I'm going to start with yellow and white on my brush. In order for this yellow or most yellows to not be see-through, you're going to have to use some white with them. So I'm going to go from my light color to my dark color for these, and I'm going to use my light color, which is going to be my yellow, to, in essence, set the stage for where I want my leaves to be. So right now, I'm in essence creating branches for my tree. So I've got all of these areas that I'm going to be putting brighter leaves on in a minute, or more vibrant leaves with different colors. But right now, I'm using my yellow and my white as almost like a primer coat for these. So they're gonna have a nice vibrant undertone to them. And then when I go to put the other colors on top of them, they're gonna really just pop out and be super bright. I am gonna be putting some low-lying foliage down at the bottom. So again, I'm starting with my yellow and white, and I'm just kind of dispersing it throughout the bottom of this tree. I do want this to kind of almost look like it's a branch coming out at the bottom here. So again, I'm just using my yellow and white as like my primer coat, so to speak. You can have some coming out from behind the tree. Maybe I'll have one over here coming out from behind the tree. And if I want it to look like a branch, I just kind of put these long, almost like pokey little branch-like structures coming off of it. And that way it gives the illusion, even if there's not a branch there, it gives the illusion that there is. I'm gonna have some coming across here. And this, of course, is gonna give you a lot of depth perception within the painting. So you can have these leaves coming in front or behind the tree, whatever works for you. Visually, you can make it as nice and bright as you want. You can hide some of your trees if you're not totally happy as to the way that they came out. These leaves are great for disguising things. So what I'm doing right now is, again, I'm just kind of setting the stage where I want the rest of my leaves to come in a moment, but I'm doing it with the yellow and white. And then as I am finished up here with putting them where I want and I've got the right formation, I'm not even gonna wash my brush. I'm just gonna start going into my next color. So right now, I'm just picking up orange and I'm gonna start to intermingle some of my orange, and I'm not gonna overdo it. I really am just kind of popping these little vibrant colors in through here. If you feel like it's starting to get muddled or it's all starting to look the same, then maybe you can wash and dry your brush and almost start from scratch, start from a nice clean brush. Or you could wait a minute and let that undercoat dry for a minute and then pop these colors in on top of it. But you can see I'm not putting my orange on every single place where I put the yellow. I'm being pretty selective where I want it to go. Right now I'm gonna start to use a little bit of the red. I did feel like I was kind of overloaded on my brush, so I just quickly washed and dried it, and now I'm gonna start to intermingle some red in through here. And again, I'm not overdoing it. I'm really kind of being, I don't want to call it cautious, but definitely I'm not overdoing it because I want that vibrancy. I want it to have that nice bright undertone to it. I'm going to be putting some vibrancy on top of it as well. Once I get all of these leaves laid out the way that I want to, I will come back and put a little bit of the white and yellow on top to give it an additional layer of dimension. But right now I'm just kind of, finishing up with the colored part of these leaves where I want them to really show their vibrancy. I just put some orange and yellow on my brush to get these nice little pops of color in through here. And again, I don't want it to be super overdone here. I'm gonna pick up a little bit of that burnt sienna just so I can have a couple of darker tones right now too. I was feeling like it was almost too light in areas and with not enough natural tone to it. So that's why I've decided to put a little bit of that rust or burnt sienna in it. And then what I'm gonna do is, as I'm finishing up here, I'm just kind of looking at it from a distance. I am going to be popping a little bit of white on top of it. That's gonna give it that extra special vibrancy on the tips of it. So now I've got just a touch of white on my brush, and this is going to solidify the dimension of it. And if you wanted to, you could go darker, you could add green leaves if you wanted to. This again is a visual preference at this point. Once you get to this stage, the vibrancy and the color choices are really a nice personal choice because, some people really like just yellow. Some people will want it to have a little bit of that tail end of the summer feel to it and maybe still have a little bit of the green intermingled in it. And you know, you've got that green in the background with the phthalo green, so you could certainly introduce that a little bit into these fall foliage, fall leaves if you wanted to. And then I am just about all set here. I am digging the way that this is coming out. I'm just adding a little bit more white in through here, make these leaves just a little bit more realistic in my opinion. That way I can rest easy, feeling that I've brought this as far as I want to bring it, maybe a little bit more white in through here. And then there is one final little step to any good painting, and that is going to happen with your tiny brush. So after you've popped in as much color and vibrancy and autumn feel as you want to for this for these leaves back here, what you'll do next is you're going to put your big brush away in your water cup and take out your small brush and get ready for the last step. All right, so for the last step, you need to sign your painting. I'm going to be using a small brush. I'm going to be using black paint. You can sign in the bottom left or the bottom right. I'm going for the bottom left. You can sign your initials, you can sign the date, you can sign your first name. Whatever is your identifying mark is your identifying mark, so you make it whatever you'd like it to be. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you love your autumn painting, and I look forward to painting with you again soon.